Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. I am Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined by Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. You can get the Talkin Tide podcast at our Twitter feed, which is Talkin_Tide. You can get quick links to all of our podcasts right there on Twitter. We're also live on Facebook and YouTube twice weekly during the football season, and of course Apple Podcasts. Just about anywhere you like to get a podcast, you can find Talkin Tide. Travis, we jump right in on this edition to talk Texas A&M preview edition, midweek edition. The Crimson Tide on the road for this one, 4-1 on the season, 2-0 in SEC play. Texas A&M with an identical record, identical SEC record, 4-1, 2-0. This one will kick at 2:30 Central Time at Kyle Field over in College Station. Of course, a CBS broadcast and a homecoming of sorts for Jalen Milroe. Travis, a Texas native who goes back to his home state. He joked earlier in the week that he's got some Texas fans. Earlier in the season, he joked he had some Texas fans in the family. I imagine he's got a few Aggies in that family as well, but I got the sense from him anyway on Monday that this one means a little more to him.
It should. His first career start came against the Aggies a year ago. He made that start against Texas, and Alabama trying to avoid the Texas two-step, I guess you could say, from the Aggies and the Longhorns in this season. So, this feels like another huge start for Jalen Milroe. Every game is a referendum, it seems like, on not just his viability in terms of the short-term future, but big picture when you think about the position at Alabama.
Yeah, no doubt. His play has certainly improved since the Texas game, no question about it. Of course, he didn't play at all against South Florida, but Ole Miss, I thought he was sharp there, played very well against Mississippi State, even though there wasn't a lot of volume there, only 12 pass attempts for Milroe. And, of course, Ty Simpson took over late in the fourth quarter of that win over Mississippi State. But you kind of want to see – we kind of know what we're going to get from Alabama's defense at this point, Travis. They've played, I think, consistently enough. And, yes, the Texas game in week 2 was a glaring exception. But aside from that, it's been a pretty consistent defense, especially pass defense. You feel like you know what you're going to get from that defense a little more. You don't quite know what you're going to get from the offense, but that's not just Milroe. You don't know what you're going to get from the line. Don't quite altogether know what you're going to get from the receivers, although I think they've been more consistent this year than they were a year ago. But, between the long snapping issues, some of the issues that they've had blocking, notwithstanding last week against Mississippi State, I thought the offensive line played its best game by far in that one. But you'd like to see them string together 2 or 3 in a row before you really kind of put some money in the bank in that offense.
Yeah, it seems like the stars for the defense have come out as we anticipated they would, whether it's Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell taking another step. Kool-Aid McKinstry's been very good. Terrion Arnold has taken another step. Malachi Moore has been very good. You anticipated Caleb Downs being a huge factor as a true freshman. He has lived up to it. So really on that side of the ball, the star power has been what you thought it would be. Offensively, not as much. You're still waiting on quarterback consistency on a week in and week out basis. I think J.C. Latham, when you talk about the offensive line, okay, yeah, he's pretty much been what you thought he would be this season, but you're right. The interior has been a little bit of a influx. I think Tyler Booker has been good, but between McLaughlin and Dalcourt and that other guard spot at times, certainly left tackle, you're still working 2 guys at that spot. You said it with the wide receivers, the consistency's been better. The drop rate, I think, has been down. But, who's the guy, really? Games like Saturdays come down to a drive. Jermaine Burton limited last week at Mississippi State. Perhaps he'll be full go this week. But, if Alabama really needs it right now, who's that guy in that wide receiver course? So Absolutely agree. When it comes to kind of where they're at on each side of the football, there's a difference there. And I think fortunately for them too, the kicking game, Will Reichard's been what you would expect him to be, and James Burnett has gotten even better. So that's been a big part of it too.
Yeah, Burton only like I think 9 or 10 snaps maybe in that game this past week against Mississippi State, so that was somewhat of a surprise. And the Ja'Cory Brooks disappearing act continues. Travis, just a couple of
Yeah.
catches for him on the season. Talking about a guy that led Alabama in touchdown catches a year ago with 8, and was right there with Burton as Alabama's leading receiver in terms of catches and yards. Seems like this staff right now is a little more comfortable, I think, with Malik Benson out there.
Yeah, we've seen more of Benson of late. In fact, when you looked at their starting trio against Mississippi State, it was pretty much different from what we had seen to this point of the season. So it's good that they have 5 or 6 guys that they feel good about. But at the end of the day, and didn't really expect them to have a 1,000-yard guy in that bunch, but thought they could have a couple of 700 plus guys, and maybe they still will. But it really hasn't played out that way to this point.
No, it had, and I think we're seeing. And I mentioned this. I asked Saban about this a couple weeks ago in a press conference. We're seeing more and more and more of Robbie Utes. It seems like Travis. Last couple of games, he's played a lot of football. Seems like this staff has decided he's a hard guy to take off the field because of what he brings in the game to the game as a blocker to help out a line that could use some help.
And if they go 12 personnel, they seem to like him and Dupree in there together. That's a
Right.
tandem at this point. When they go 11, it seems like it's more Amari Niblack. But I thought all 3 of those guys gave them some really quality snaps last week in Starkville, probably more so with Dupree and Oots as blockers. I thought Dupree was exceptional in that regard. And then Niblack gave you some of the splash plays uh, as a receiver against State.
Um, Test for Alabama on the road with that line and the snap issues, Travis. And obviously, there was one big mishap last week on the road against Mississippi State. Nick Saban comes up every week with Saban. Sometimes he doesn't even wait for the question. Sometimes he volunteers. He preempts it. But the exchange between McLaughlin and Milrow has just got to get cleaned up fast. I can't imagine that something that simple being a problem all season long. Maybe it will be, but we're getting near the halfway point now and we're still talking about it. And, Milrose handled it, I think, exceptionally well. If you go back, he's actually made some big plays off of bad snaps this season.
Mhm.
So, for a young quarterback, I don't think you can ask much more of him in terms of how he's dealt with these snaps that have been high, have been low, have been wide here and there. But they've got to get that corrected. And the worst thing you can do is have It's bad enough for that to happen at home. When something like that happens on the road, it's a double whammy.
Yeah, it got glossed over last week. Kool-Aid's fumble, his muff of the punt early, and then the shotgun snap that was an issue that easily could have been recovered by Mississippi State. Those things get covered up when you go up 14-0 and you kind of control things from that point forward. But that is, we've said, is whistling by the graveyard. You can't do that week in and week out. You certainly can't do it against better teams, which I think right now Texas A&M is a better team than Mississippi State. So you do that against the Aggies on Saturday. I got to think the chances of you surviving both of those situations is very minimal, and the likelihood is you don't survive either. And as a result, you're very much in a 4-quarter battle for your lives, and that's a tough place to be in a place like that, because this is a rejuvenated A&M team right now. That loss against Miami seemingly took a lot out of A&M in week 2, but the back-to-back conference wins, Max Johnson stepping in there and playing well in place of Connor Weigman, and knowing that the last time Alabama went out there, A&M was able to get a win with Zach Calzada at quarterback. There's a lot of belief for A&M right now, but that's a continuing theme, more so than I can ever recall since the very early stages of Nick Saban's tenure. it's like week in and week out now. Every one of these teams seem really confident that they can beat this Alabama team. And it goes
Right.
back to last year. It's not just this year. Seems like every since Tennessee last season, every week in the SEC, hey, these guys we can get now.
Yep.
It goes to kind of the mystique and the advantage Alabama's had that way for so many years. It's not the stronghold that Alabama once had.
If you watched Lane Kiffin's post game presser after the loss in Tuscaloosa, you could read it on his face.
Crestfallen. He
He
had
thought
them
this was going to be the year that
even
the
more
Rebels
than
were going to.
last November when Ole Miss thought they had a great shot at home with
Yep.
Alabama coming off LSU.
Yep.
That was he feels like he's lost 2 in the last 10 months because that was a November game. This was in September. I mean, he's had 2 good shots in 10 months, and he knows he should be, at least in his mind anyway, should be 1-1.
A lot closer in Oxford last year, certainly, than they were in Tuscaloosa this year. But the point's well taken. If I remember right, Ole Miss had a 1 point lead even this year in
Yeah.
Tuscaloosa at the half, so they were
Yeah, I
right
mean,
there.
they left points on the table in the first half. I know Alabama can say maybe the same thing, but they missed that short field goal right before the break, or it's a 10-6 game.
Sure did. All right, Max Johnson, as you noted, Travis stepping in for Connor Weigman at the quarterback position, played well in a win over Auburn last week. Didn't seem like that A&M offense missed a beat. Anais Smith at wide receiver, an outstanding player. Evan Stewart too, though. Travis, Evan Stewart, his
Big
numbers
time.
are pretty much right there with Smith's, and he's got 4 touchdown grabs this season. So, a couple of tough receivers to deal with right there. But the trust factor, I think, in this secondary and with this pass rush is pretty high with this coaching staff right now. The run defense is, I think, a couple of steps behind the pass defense right now in terms of effectiveness. But right now, Alabama seems pretty well equipped to take on a good passing team.
They are. Now, Anais Smith, he's another level going from Tulu Griffin to Anais Smith working in the slot. So, that's going to be a big challenge, whether it's Malachi Moore in the nickel or if they're in dime and Terrion Arnold moves in there, that could be his guy as well. I mean, we saw what Anais Smith did to Brian Branch in College Station a couple of years ago and in that game. And he's been very good in this series and he seems very motivated based on his words this week. So, yeah, I mean, but you've got those corners playing at a high level. Malachi's playing at a high level. I think your safeties you feel pretty good about. I think Jalen Key is maybe the question mark in that back end as much as anyone, and I don't think he's a bad player. But ultimately, it's going to be, can Alabama get Texas A&M into obvious passing situations, and then can Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell against those A&M tackles get home? If they can do that, Max Johnson is not a redwood back there. He's an adequate runner, and he'll run sometimes when you're just not thinking he's going to run, and he'll convert some plays. But they need to be able to really affect Max Johnson, who, if I have a sort of knock on him, is that certainly compared to Connor Weigman, the ball doesn't come out as quickly or
No.
with as much zip or RPMs on it.
Weigman's got some zip. There's no doubt about it. He's got an
He's
NFL
got some
caliber on him.
energy. Yeah,
Yes,
energy, as they like to say.
his ball whistles, no question
Yeah.
about it. Deontay Lawson, the Alabama linebacker, Travis. We'll see what happens with him. Of course, he missed last week's game with an ankle injury. Nick Saban today on his teleconference noting that he's back at practice, but Saban was pretty tentative about what Lawson might be able to give Alabama on Saturday in College Station. Said the same thing about Terrence Ferguson, who's coming off an injury himself, but also is back to practice. Lawson, obviously, more of a key guy for Alabama, but you know, as a play, you like to have the guy you trust the most calling the fronts and handling the signals at linebacker on the road, especially in a place that can get as loud as Kyle Field. So Lawson's ability to participate or not participate in this game could be a pretty big factor.
It could. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Trez Marshall, coming from a system basically identical to what Alabama employs, I think I feel pretty good about him if he's needed in that role. But there's some give and take too. If you go dime and you want to leave Marshall out there because you feel better about how he can make those calls, you might lose something in terms of athleticism and sort of range and the ability to play in space in the dime if you leave him out there and take Jahad Campbell off. So there's some things to consider too from that perspective. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll see how it all plays out.
All right, the Ticket Man and the Vegas Man, Travis, real quick updates there. Pretty pricey for the primo seats, and you'd expect that at Texas A&M with them sitting 2-0 in SEC play, hosting Alabama. Right now, the nosebleed seats in the upper decks at Kyle Field, they're about what you'd expect. They're going for $150 to $200 online, of course, at last check. But the prime seats between the 40s and that lower bowl, I saw a couple at 500. I saw a couple at 1,500. So the boys are definitely looking to make a killing, and we'll see what happens in terms of
it's a bounce back game for the Texas A&M Ticket Man, because after that Miami loss, even though it's Alabama and you expect to do well regardless, I'm not sure he was expecting this, right?
Right.
Pretty good.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't, and it's made a little bit of a clawback game, I think, for the man with Alabama coming in. A lot of excitement, obviously, and that Miami loss was obviously a damper and a downer for Texas A&M. But if you're 2-0 in the league, you still got a lot of juice, I think, with that fan base. They're looking to get over the top in the West this year if they can. The West is wide open, Travis. I mean, it could be Alabama, it could be Texas A&M, could still be LSU. A lot can happen yet. So Texas A&M definitely likes their chances. Even with Connor Weigman out, you get the sense that Texas A&M feels like this might be their year to kind of get over the top in the division. The Vegas Man, Alabama, Travis, a 2.5-point favorite in College Station. The over-under is 47 points. Generally speaking, I've always kind of liked that 2.5 number to lay because it's just short of a field goal, and most games are going to be decided by 3 or more. If you're knotted at the end, you can cover that 2.5 with one kick with 5 seconds left.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel a lot better about 3 at 2.5 than I do 3.5. Back in my, in an earlier life anyway, I did.
Back in your days of worst decisions.
Yes, when the man did some of his light work where I was concerned,
So think about that over/under at 47. Seems a little bit low, although with Alabama's offense,
I think it's just right.
If
I'm thinking a score prediction right now, I'm thinking mid-20s wins it. 23-26, a 26-21. So, again, for me, he's right on it at 47, 40. He's going to make you make a decision, and a lot of times you're not going to be able to sleep well with it.
I snuck in another jab on him last week with that under.
You got your ticket? Let's see your winning ticket.
It's in the pay.
Yeah,
published.
That's what the man says to that. Yeah, let's see.
Right.
Yeah, you got your ticket on you.
That's fair. Yes, I'm just providing a service now, Travis.
It's a PSA, exactly.
It's a reader service. Yeah, we had Tennessee, South Carolina under 64 last week, and it looked terrible. Right when the Alabama Mississippi State game kicked off, I was watching that game on the laptop right before that Alabama kickoff just to see how it's going. South Carolina scored a touchdown with about 11 minutes left in the third quarter to make it, I think, 31-17. So that's 48 right there with almost a whole half to go. And I'm thinking that's dead. And turns out they slowed the scoring down just enough for that under to come through. This week I like LSU laying 6.5 at Missouri, Travis. They're on the bounce coming off of that loss to Ole Miss. I happen to think I've always felt like that Missouri home field advantage is a little soft, maybe. And, I think LSU is the more talented team. They're on a bounce back scenario coming off the L. And I don't think Mizzou is played a lot of teams. And so you put all that together and I know you like them home dogs, but you put all that together and I'll take the road favorite.
Yeah, those home dogs can have teeth, and sometimes the road team can win, but a lot of times it's tight. So I can see LSU winning that game by 6 or more. You might have to sweat a little bit this week, Goodbread, on that one.
You sweat every week with these things, no doubt. Even when you're just providing a service,
Yeah, I like that.
You sweat either way. All right, the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. Going to thank a couple of our fine sponsors right now. First, we're going to tell you a little bit about Heat Pizza Bar and that fantastic pizza that Frank Fleming and his staff is serving up over in Government Square in Tuscaloosa. Hey, if you're looking for a great place to watch the Alabama-Texas A&M game this Saturday in Tuscaloosa, can't do any better than Heat. They've got flat screen TVs all over the place and super pizzas, signature pizzas, great sides, salads, and a full bar. You cannot beat the atmosphere over at Heat Pizza Bar. Try those jalapeno poppers, too. They're some of my favorite in all of Tuscaloosa. Great daily specials as well. That Thursday special, pepperoni or cheese for just $8 from 2 to 6 p.m. Also $3 off on cocktails from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. So the next time you're in the mood for some great pizza, go see Frank Fleming and his great staff at 2256th Street, downtown in Government Square.
Going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Get by there for the weekend. They're going to have those hand-dipped chocolate strawberries dipped daily for you at Peterbrook Chocolatier. Of course, that chocolate-covered popcorn, the signature item for decades now at Peterbrook Chocolatier, and those chocolate footballs. So, you're going to have a get-together of some kind this weekend. Make it extra special. Make it Peterbrook. Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa.
All right, the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network, the Twitter feed Talkin_Tide. Give us a follow there. Give us a like on Facebook, a subscribe on YouTube, and we'll get you through this season with twice weekly podcasts on the Crimson Tide's 2023 season. For the back end of the show, as always, Travis, we'll look around the SEC. We'll dive into that two-deep tumbler before we get out of here. But really the game of the week, Travis, Kentucky at Georgia. Kentucky undefeated, just coming off that big win over the Florida Gators. A lot of people excited about that one. Georgia has looked beatable more than once this season. Going to be real fun to see if Mark Stoops can go in there and hang in there with the number one team in the country.
I think they can hang in, even in Athens, even at Sanford Stadium. I mean, we saw South Carolina do it a couple weeks ago. Win the game, yeah, that's a little bit of a different story. So I'm going to go with Georgia winning that game, but Kentucky keeping it close enough that maybe Mark Stoops in the next week or so gets another extension at UK. Is a guy that feels like at this point, Chase, he can pretty much coach football at UK and live in Lexington as long as he wants to.
He'll go out on his terms, I think. No doubt about it. Mark Stoops had putting together some strong years at Kentucky, stronger anyway than most people would have imagined. I like Georgia too. I think that number's 13.5. I'm not positive of that, but I think so. Probably like Kentucky with those points, but I do like Georgia to win the game. LSU at Missouri. We touched on that one already, Travis. Brady Cook's had a nice year for Missouri so far. Again, I think there's early schedule's been a little on the soft side. I do like LSU to bounce back there. Forget the spread. Who do you like to just win that game?
I went blank. Who are we talking about?
LSU, Missouri.
Okay. We're back to the Tigers, the two Tigers. I like LSU again. As I said earlier, I think LSU wins the game. I don't know if I like them to cover that on the road.
Yeah, gotcha. And then finally, going to touch on Arkansas's road trip to Ole Miss. The Rebels coming off of that huge win over LSU, just utter delirium in Oxford coming off of that victory. So they're riding pretty high. Arkansas has had a tough stretch with Sam Pittman, Travis, for sure. Who you like there? I think I like Ole Miss at home, but I'm not going to be shocked if Arkansas hangs in this thing and gives them all they want.
Yeah, can Ole Miss handle it? And it's been 2 emotional, physical weeks. Not just for Ole Miss though. I mean, it's the same thing, and Arkansas has been through a lot. I mean, the comments from Sam Pittman a couple weeks ago after that draining LSU loss, and then to lose another emotional rivalry type game with Texas A&M. It's a what's left in the tank for either of these teams. It kind of feels like. So I'm going to go with Ole Miss. I just think the firepower right now offensively, especially. I think A&M held Arkansas to under 200 total yards. So I'm going to go with the homestanding Rebels.
All right, we're going to jump in that two deep tumbler really quickly, and then we're going to get out of here on Talkin Tide. That'll be a wrap once we get through that. Let's see who's going to come out of here today. Who we got? We've got. That went well for a change, getting the ball out of the tumbler. Number 40, Kendrick Blackshire, the inside linebacker for the Crimson Tide. Travis has played more football overall this season than I was kind of expecting, frankly. He's put himself into that mix for playing time, rotating with Marshall. And even before Lawson went out, we were seeing a lot of Kendrick Blackshire.
Yeah, and he's another Texan, so it's appropriate this week. He's going back home too. He is a guy that I think has done a nice job of sort of evolving and, as much as anything, just staying healthy, because the first couple of years that was probably as much of an issue for Kendrick Blackshire, similar to Deontay Lawson, unfortunately, as far as making a run at legitimate playing time. But give him credit. Justin Jefferson comes in from the junior college ranks. I think a lot of people anticipated seeing him on the field. At this point in the season, that hasn't happened because guys like Trez Marshall and Kendrick Blackshire have been able to, maintain their reps. So, good player, good special teams player when he's been in that role too. But I'll be interested to see if he's still in that mix on Saturday. If Lawson is out, do we continue to see him rotate in there? I think Campbell of the 3 is somehow, some way, the guy you probably try to figure to keep on the field the most. But I still think there's a place for Blackshire too.
Yeah, Jefferson, we've really only seen on special teams to this point in the season. Blackshire, a guy who's, to me, he's kind of built and kind of plays like the old school inside linebacker, Travis, who's a little bit more of a gap filler, kind of an upfield player as opposed to a lateral guy. And that's difficult for that style of linebacker to play in this day and age in college football. So if nothing else, you tip your hat to the guy for getting on the field when the passing game, the way it's played in college football now, all the perimeter stuff you see, the RPOs, it's well suited for linebackers that can go sideline to sideline, work in open space. And that's not to say Blackshire can't, because I think he can. But he's built more like a Reggie Ragland, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Than anything else.
Yeah, I think Blackshire is more of a base and nickel guy. When you get into the dime, that's where I don't see him translating to that package, but maybe more so than I would have before this year, because I've seen some things from him outside the tackle box that make me think he could get by. But is that an area where he's going to excel in linebacker play? Probably not. And he's also not a guy in the dime that you think about kicking out to the edge, right, and bringing him after the quarterback. So probably a 2-package guy at this point, but he's been solid.
He has. He made a nice play against Ole Miss on a jet sweep in the second half against the Rebels for a tackle for loss. Kind of saw it coming before the snap, saw that jet sweep motion coming, and started sliding before the handoff even came, and made a nice play in the backfield. So, he's made some noise on the perimeter, no question about it. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. Thanks for joining us. And be sure to join us once again on Sunday night. Travis and I will reconvene to recap Alabama's road game at Texas A&M. Until then, for Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, and we'll talk to you this weekend here on Talkin Tide.